That's 5 past now, Zebra, if you want to start.
Okay, well, I'll do that. Luke Tozer would have introduced us, but he asked me just to do a brief introduction to Newground Architects. We are based in London Bridge, and our 8-strong team come from various parts of the world, but we've all known one another for quite a while. Some people having studied together in London, and others like myself and founding director Jordan Perlman, who's attending, had been colleagues in large London practice, PRP Architects, for over 10 years before starting Newground. And we are unusual as a startup company, in the sense that in the first 4 or 5 years in practice, our projects were quite large and complex schemes, and that's how it happened. And subsequently, having built up track record under our own belt, so to speak, we have more recently been working on public funded projects, mainly local authorities. And the projects that I've selected to show are in that order. I'll start with projects that we've actually completed and then move on to others that are on the drawing board at various stages of planning, pre-planning, and such like. And you'll have to stop me, Cheryl, if you see it going over, because I just selected quite a lot of slides, but I'll probably talk about some projects more than others because they're representative of the kind of work that we have done or the kind of things that we'd like to do. Is it showing? Can people see this now on their screens? This is
yes, it is.
Yeah, good. This is rehearsal rooms, which is actually a high density built to rent scheme. It's one of the first to be completed in the capital, and we were commissioned on this within 4 months of having started our practice in 2013. It is in an area which was designated opportunity area around the turn of the century by the Mayor of London. Areas are close to transport hubs, as areas where you could go quite high density, although the immediate surrounding area isn't necessarily. I think the Olympic Village area fell into that category as well. And immediately to the north of the site is the Park Royal Industrial Estate, and that's across the track from Central Line. And to the right, closer to London, is the Old Oak Common regeneration area, which is still ongoing. It's only gathering speed now, I imagine. By the time we were appointed on this project, there were quite a few of the buildings that had been earmarked, high density buildings, were completed on the south side of our site. And I believe the building that is to the east of ours is being pulled down to be replaced by something much bigger. And there was a station square planned by the local authority at the time, which is now complete. So it's right next to North Acton tube station. And it has nothing, I mean, the name Rehearsal Studios comes from some kind of association of the site with BBC, but I don't believe there were any rehearsal rooms on the site. I think it sounds good. The site by our client was purchased at the time. It had outlined an illustrative scheme for a building that looked like this. And our client was keen to kind of make changes both to the appearance as well, basically they didn't want something looking quite like this, as well as wanting to build more on the site. And you know, just briefly to see, we agreed with them that we wanted to do something different, and there was a token sort of gesture to the planning design officers who wanted more variety. So we had two different colors of brickwork, but once completed, in fact, there is the difference between the two brick colors is so subtle that is barely perceptible. The building occupies the entire site area, so and it's sort of conceived as two towers with a linking block. The variety of materials and the fragmentation of the elevations and so on had been such that we were keen to bring some of that concept back to how the project should go forward. You know, thinking of it as towers and how kind of any kind of breaking up of the mass could be reintegrated using the form of the balconies that from the very outset played quite a strong role in both the way that the building expressed itself externally, as well as the way actually the planning works internally as well, which I'll come to. The two towers were also conceived as being kind of identical in plan for all intents and purposes. It's just that the western block has got sort of a couple of fault lines around which the plan slips to in order to accommodate the geometry of the site. One of the things that as a practice we strive to do is simplify the internal planning, make it very efficient in terms of, and in the process actually making it pleasant as well. In here, the majority of the flats are double aspect and larger corner flats, and we have avoided long corridors, sort of a tight central circulation, vertical circulation core, and generally stacking the flats and so that there are no transfer structures, and then the structure is simpler and the servicing of the building is simpler. And in fact, by avoiding complexity, we wanted to actually conjure sort of more value from the funds that were available to build the scheme, because it was built to fairly economic rates, but it does achieve certain quality in a completed project. This is something that we both took to planning, as well as we were novated to work with a large contractor to deliver. In many ways, it was a first, well, for all concerned, the client and ourselves included. The client hadn't actually built anything before. They had a large portfolio of buildings that they managed. They just purchased completed kind of developments, and they managed them. And in undertaking this development, they were quite open to ideas, which was nice for us as well. We were able to implement some unusual things that I'll come to in a moment. On the fourth floor, we have the equivalent of a 2-bedroom flat area was the residence common room. This was an unusual thing to do, and the developer was happy to do that so it create a kind of community in amongst people who are going to be renting, and it has been successful. We've been back to the project since, and we've seen people forming friendships, kind of baby minding, going running together, film clubs and such like. So it's been quite a successful room. There is free Wi-Fi and then the kitchenette, and people can hire it for parties. And it has direct access to a roof terrace where parties and so on can take place. I mentioned the balconies, sort of the role of them architecturally integrating the building, and also kind of in terms of plan, the way the planning is arranged. There is privacy between the triangular balconies, and so there's both privacy as well as views. We experimented with different diameters of steel tubes. Obviously, these are plastic. We made a full-size mock-up using plastic tubing and timber rails for top and bottom rails, and we experimented with different spacing, and there is a gradation of these. The spacing sort of starting at 100 mil, which you have to, but it reduces, and it allows to have more variety in terms of transparency and privacy. We experimented with all sorts of colors and finishes, and developed the elevations to quite a significant level at planning stage. Since the building occupies 100% of the area, it was important to use the roofs as best as we could, and they're all landscaped as attractive, accessible terraces. And visually, we created a connection between various levels of roof terraces in order to add to the experience of the building. The car parking, there's only limited cars and electric charging points for electric cars and for disabled people, but it was covered over, and we wanted to treat it in such a way that was brought on board as one of the amenity spaces. There are 3 very large diameter holes in the terrace above that create a visual connection all the way up, and the access decks that serve the link block have got openings which both put a distance between the sort of circulation area as well as the and the private windows, as well as creating a visual connection vertically. The holes actually had a practical purpose. They were for smoke and fume evacuation, that we were required to have them, and these kind of rectangular openings are the slots that I was referring to. Again, sort of view down the various terraces up through the first floor deck over the car park actually also doubles as a play space for children. The large units, the 3-bedroom units, are overlooked at, and some of them directly access it, and others through decks. The deck doesn't have the link block doesn't have a core of its own, but it can be accessed from the vertical cores at either end that serve the towers. I mean, the way this building feels, actually, the railway track feels a bit like being by a canal, because it's quite tall and you don't actually have a view of rail tracks, so that you have the view of the opening. It reads very much as a open and a river or a canal. The contrast of the sculptural relief of balconies and the very simple facades that face east and west comes across in these photographs. From a distance, actually, the way that the alignment of the balconies does, especially at street level, if you're not aware of the different heights, does pull the form of the Western Bloc into one block. So it is integrated in that way. Internally, one of the things that we were able to implement was propose tiled flooring, which is quite unusual. And you know, people these days are, well, mostly in some of our recent projects, people have been wanting fake timber strips, or you know, in more in other developments, it's been engineered floor. Here we had tile flooring, which actually is quite appropriate for a building that they were encouraging. Well, it's pet friendly, so there was no restriction people having pets, and so it's more durable and more robust. We also proposed full height frameless doors, and we experimented with that in our own office to make sure that it was robust and it worked. And having this was the first large scale use of the frameless doors in London, and it's caught on since, and it's being used quite widely by a lot of developers. This was another large scale, higher density scheme that we undertook. We started designing it about the same time as we were building the previous project that I showed you. And we also designed this, took it to planning, as well as through construction, we renovated and built this. It's part of the regeneration of the old vinyl factory in Hayes. And the initial proposal, the master plan for the area had sort of set some parameters for heights and density and so on. But as usual, clients wanted more out of the site if it could be if it could be gleaned, and that happened mainly at ground level. I'll come to, because the height parameters was set and we couldn't go any higher than that. Initially, it had been assumed that there were two levels of parking serving this building, as well as next door building that was also going to be developed by our client. And here, the additional kind of homes that we managed to conjure up was by a step that did achieve a few things. Instead of having the parking at ground level and having duplexes surrounding which was the initial assumption, we, alongside the engineer, we were working very closely with the structural engineer. A decision was made to half sink the car park, the lower level of the car park, into the ground. It did a lot of things. First of all, we were able to simplify the tanking, and there was no piling, so we went for a very thick slab at ground level. So the tanking was dead simple, no perforations, nothing through it, and it reduced the length of the ramps that led to the car park, and created a simple, imperfect box. So we created light wells similar to front areas of London terrace houses, and we turned what would have been duplexes to hide the car parking into three-story townhouses, and with and that was very appealing to the end user who wanted larger units for families, for built to rent. This was also built to rent entirely. And it also reduced the frontage by making these double aspect. We were able to reduce the frontage to use the same kind of grid as the flats above, got rid of transfer structures and doubled the number of ground floor units. So it was quite welcomed by the client, and it animated the street. The front doors in the street and go and steps up. It was unusual, but actually there is an alternative level access from the courtyard garden, which was visible in this section. The outside is very kind of, it's quite austere and in industrial kind of architecture of the area, which was a historic industrial site. But internally, it's a lush series of terraced hanging gardens overlooking one another, children's play area and so on. Kind of interspersed with real work, we also have always been interested in research and development competitions and so on. And this is a scheme that, this is a proposal that my business partner was very keen on, and we've been trying to find interested parties. It is, the idea is, we find a lot of off-site manufacturing and standardization is sort of comes into the design process sometimes quite late, and with a lot of volumetric projects that we'd seen proposed. There were too many different types. What's unique about this scheme is that it proposes one volumetric module, and it can be kind of clad in various different materials and assembled in different ways to create different sizes of units. So it could be a single aspect. It doesn't have to be, but it can work as a single aspect one-bedroom flat, or it can work as a double aspect narrow frontaged two-bedroom flat, or a single aspect wider frontage. So and not only that, you could actually use the same module, and by assembling them in different ways, you can create houses and community with houses and flats, and this is a sort of hypothetical, very regular site. But this is the thing that with volumetric, it's essential that you start with the unit and design a scheme around it. And there are certain redundancies in both the planning and the site planning, but that's where where you gain is by standardizing. More recently, I mentioned, since we've had since we've been able to work with clients who build social housing and use public funds, we've been involved in projects for local authorities. And for London Borough of Newham, we undertook 10 projects in the last 3 years, and we're now building 3 of them on site. 8 of these were done to a very breakneck speed because the local authority had fallen behind with their funding, with the program that was part of the funding conditions by the GLA. Those were quite unusual, but having succeeded meeting the submission for planning deadlines, then we had 2 more projects which we did up to passive house standards, and they varied really. Mostly were garage sites, but every single one was different in a way, and they varied from sort of a street full of houses to sort of developments that are entirely flats. But what's quite common to all of them is that they are very different, very site specific. And whilst they push the boundaries in what you can build on a site, they are very reasonable and kind of in terms of quality of life that the client expects to create. And they're obviously motivated by different incentives than they would be if a private developer was doing the same project. That street project, for instance, the site of 36 garages accommodates 12 houses, including four-bedroom wheelchair houses. I mean, these are unusual kind of sizes and mixes, and the local authorities are just taking it very seriously to cater for things that haven't been provided for the last 30, 40 years in London. And the site, this is very site specific. The depth of the site is shallow, long, so there are no habitable windows on the rear facade that overlooks the private gardens of existing houses. The height is suppressed, and the different materials, and the roof you see, and then the brickwork is visible so that it doesn't come across as monolithic. And there are small windows to bathrooms and such like. Amenity space at ground is limited, so there's roof terraces, and so all habitable rooms basically overlook the street and animate the street. That was sort of a street full of houses, and this is an info site for flats, 6-story block that has 4 levels of flats on duplexes. For Haringey, our current, quite a lot of our current projects are with London Borough of Haringey, and we've currently got 5 sites, 5 projects with them. And one has been through planning and just gone out for tender, waiting for tenders to come back. 2 others are kind of getting close to submission for planning, and others at various stages. I'll just very quickly flick through a couple of them, and then I might show you, if there's time, I can show you a bit more of the various other types of projects that we've been working with. What's close is the one project that the first of our projects with London Borough of Haringey, and that's been through planning and is now in tender. That's not actually a garage site, as you can see currently has bungalows. I think, in fact, they're being demolished as we speak. And Seaford Road is the main road that curves in front. I hope you can see my cursor, and that's the main entrance. And there was sort of parking, and there was parking hard standing for the bungalows. And on Greenfield Road, there was a very forbidding little alleyway that came through and was a sort of hot spot for antisocial behavior. And sort of a community room, which is not connected actually, they just happened to be cheek by jowl, was also, that building was asbestos riddled and out of, had been out of use for ages. So that was brought into the same development and presented as something that had been going for a while before we got involved. The site actually, as I said, it wasn't a garage site, but it had, when we did some historic research, we realized that it was a leftover site. The area was being developed in the 1880s, around the same time as the railway lines were being laid across London, or the railway line might have been laid a little bit earlier. So when the sort of speculative developers reached to a stage where they couldn't just roll out their standard house types, they stopped. And then subsequently, it was used for light industrial, and in this, I think in this late or early 60s, they had the bungalows in there, and now it was earmarked for development. When we came on board, the client had been working with another architect earlier, and the left-hand side is a kind of outline of the scheme that had been being considered, but wasn't very welcome by the planners. The access to the site was widened in some ways, or deepened into the site, and it seemed to be generated by the needs of the refuse and service vehicles, and the opening to Greenfield Road was grudgingly, I think, acknowledged, because they couldn't build on it because there is a substation and below ground high voltage cables that you could no longer build on. When we came on board, the first thing that we wanted to do, we saw it, can we actually create some kind of a really visible good link? I mean, that was our number one priority, but can we in some way continue the terrace of existing houses? And after many iterations, this is the sort of footprint, diagrammatic footprint that we came up with, and it consists of houses in the center and then flats on either side. And the trick in here with the flats was to break down the volume and the mass so that it could sit in this tiny area of small two-story houses, and that's how we achieved that, by kind of generally breaking up the mass of the block of flats so that the frontage was very similar to the houses. So the balconies of the flats kind of set the subdivision of the long facade. So this is not a big footprint. It reads like a small footprint, the same as the houses where you see the party walls and then the kind of the which are marked by the rainwater pipes, and we proposed two houses and on the footprint of the community room, and we resisted every attempt. There were some attempts at right at the early stages, or why can't we have give access to these houses, so there's central space for play area for children, but I mean that was going to be compromising so many things, and we said, well, those two houses have got their own front door, and there is a nearby open space that we hope to bring back for the use of the community. And this is just the plan, and I don't know, that's sorry, this is quite faint, I realize, but the flats are 3-story, same as the houses, so that the scale is just important. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a message saying my internet connection is unstable. I hope you can hear me still.
It's been fine generally, Zeba. A little bit here and there, but it's generally fine, so don't worry.
Okay. Sorry. And one thing that is not visible from this is just the ground floor plan, so you can't see that. But the flats obviously don't have lifts; they're 3-story, and generally local authorities don't want additional costs imposed on the residents unless you go really above 4-story. In here, the staircase is central and top lit, and it's going to be quite a pleasant very, very unusual. You know, it's not a dog leg, it actually goes up in a nice spiral, and it's not actually a spiral, obviously it has landings and so on, but it spirals in form, and it's top lit with a really large well in the middle. So we're looking forward to building that. And a view of the entrance from the Seaford Road, and the entrance, there is no vehicular connection through the site. It is just pedestrian, and we managed by tracking and vehicle tracking and all that to show that in fact all the servicing could happen by emergency and service vehicles stopping at either street and then reaching everything. So this would be quite a nice enclave. And this is the sort of the harder scheme of the design expresses itself from the other side, where, you know, at the moment there's a really kind of menacing alleyway, and otherwise the substation, which we hope will get kind of tidied up as well. A view of this central space. And this is probably the last kind of project that I want to show. I think we probably, I don't know how long I've been going about 40 minutes, but I've got some other kind of smaller projects to show briefly. This one I'll say a little bit more. Kerswell Close is a corner site, very prominent. Seven Sisters Road is running a sort of north side on one side of it, and St. Anne's Road running to the west of it. So it is a prominent site along Seven Sisters Road. And before we had been involved, there had been two designs for the site, and for various reasons they've been not welcome by the planning authority mainly. And this is just a diagram showing what we did. The previous scheme to us, and not the one before that, proposed a sort of a barrier, almost like a wall, all the way around the site. And we started by sort of thinking what would happen if you break it up, and what would happen if you're kind of changing the orientation and then softening the edges. And then something we wanted to do, creating a space that everyone could be brought into and then entering the buildings. And so we created a little link at ground level to as a sort of common entrance to that common, but it's not a private space, obviously, but it will be private to the block. And the external environment is fairly busy at the moment. Seven Sisters Road is really very noisy, and there's some dense tree planting around the edges as well. So actually forming entrances along the street was not a good idea. This is just showing the same idea in plan, meaning we inherited something that went very close to the edges. We thought, well, we'll cut it back, introduce a visual connection, kind of change the orientation and soften the edges. The car parking area was never accessible from the street anyway. It was always, there was a barrier at Kerswell Close that you could get through to it, but there was no access from the street, and that was for good reasons, actually. Sort of three-dimensionally, that's what we're doing. This project, we are sort of getting close to. We've been through a pre-app, which has been very well received, and it's been seen by their quality review panel, and we are sort of gearing up towards planning, but still there's a lot to do. Buildings around the site are of different periods and different colors, and this is just diagrammatic. So one of the things that we are really working at the moment is how we take some of the surrounding character in there and yet have this quite distinctive and of its own kind of character, but relating. This is the view of the entrance that I mentioned, and the two blocks are at different height for various overshadowing or overlooking, and all of those things taking into account. View from across the junction. There's a railway line going all the way across, which goes to Seven Sisters Road Station, and elevation, sort of flat elevation, which obviously will never be seen. So we are working. Kind of the idea was to have a band that kind of went across and brought together the two forms, and also performed a number of kind of function and sort of practical roles where we are integrating sills and lintels, and we're trying to avoid lintels at our brick, which is always a kind of supported with steel anyway. So we are using precast elements in a way that will bear on either side, it will carry its own weight. And so thinking about this and the functionality at the same time. And view from the St. Anne's Road, which is a conservation area, starting with the building you see on the left-hand side. So it was a very important view. And the design, the planners and their design officers wanted, and we thought it would be appropriate to go higher at this point, but we are now down to 5-story, and the 5-story block, and then a 4-story. I think that was about kind of what I was going to sort of talk about, but I can very quickly, if people still have an appetite, flick through some of the other schemes that projects that we haven't built, and to some extent there will be kind of either competition entries or research and development. I can go through. That be worth doing.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. I think yes. I think yes. Please carry on.
Okay. Well, I'll flick through this one quickly, and then I will come to an end very quick.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks, Eva.
Yeah. This was called kind of affordable city living, and then I was inspired by wanting to build sort of smaller flats for individuals in very accessible places, and the kind of thing that Pocket, if you're familiar with, developing. And the inspiration for this was, it was different in the sense that I was trying to create extra frontage from the way the facade is carved out, and the 37 square meter module has got an independent bedroom and an independent living room, but all within the sort of frontage of a single aspect module. So it's not as wide as a one bedroom flat. You know, this is kind of about 5.5 meters from memory, and the area is 37 square meters. Putting one on top of another was to generate duplex, or you could put them side by side to create sort of larger units. And so the inset balcony gave the opportunity to provide direct light to the bedroom, which could be either sort of opened up to become part of the living room or closed off. view from the bedroom and view of the balcony. We took part in a competition to design a synagogue in North London. The site of the synagogue is currently, well, was at the time, I think they're building it now, in the corner of two sites, and we were the front runner. We didn't get this one, but we came up with a form that had a kind of religious significance, and I'll just click through. With basically the main space in the middle and ancillary spaces, they were actually like operating like a community building as well, nursery and meeting room for the community. We took part in a competition in Portugal, and that was for a rest chapel. And that was it.
Well, thank you, Zeba. I mean, speaking as a non-architect, that was absolutely fascinating, I have to say. And I just want to open it up if you all unmute, and feel free to just have a open discussion, ask Zeba some questions. And thank you so much, Zeba, for taking the time tonight. I'm just going to start my video. Thank you so much for doing that.
Not at all. It's been
absolutely fascinating. You're so clever, all of you architects. So if you'd just like to unmute everyone and just maybe say thank you to Zeba and ask any questions that you wish.
Thank you. Can I ask how much of your work, if any, you get from frameworks?
Well, the local authority kind of housing projects are generally through frameworks. Yeah.
And did you find that it's worth the effort of getting onto the frameworks, and you get or do you still have to go through a competition process even though you're on the framework?
I'm afraid so. It is actually loops and hoops, but we couldn't find any other way of doing it, you know. But we also find that in all of those cases, it does help if people know of you. And whilst it's a kind of a fair and square competition, if there is someone in there who has heard of you and can put a good word in for you, you get looked at. Otherwise, I mean, I think we've had our fair chance of being left on the kind of by the side and not getting anywhere, I have to say. And yeah, that's quite a tough thing, and we still try, you know. But it's not fair, but it is. That's how it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thought your work. Sorry, do you want to go ahead? No, okay.
Please.
I thought your work was very inspiring. Thank you. I have a question. I like the fact that you have so many balconies. But do you find that people make good use of the balconies, or is it sometimes a depository of their junk, like you see a lot of places, in a lot of places?
I'll have to say that with the completed projects, the two that I showed you, they have been actually very well used, and I mean, but they are for a different kind of clients, I guess. With the social housing, we have yet to see, because they as I mentioned, and we've been going for 8 years. In the first few years, we only it just so happened, you know, and it was completely fortuitous. We had some large projects from private developers who had known us, or indirectly, it wasn't even direct. But the projects that we now do for local authorities, there are various stages of execution. So the most advanced ones are going to be completed later this year. So we have yet to see how the balconies are used. But generally, we are putting them in places where we think people should use them. And I think our clients are very concerned about having enough storage in these flats as well. There's a huge number of, the area for storage is a lot more than you and I would have in our own place. So they're designed to discourage people using using it as a storage place. But who's to tell? I mean, I think it's control, it's management to some extent, and we haven't yet reached the stage where I can say, well, we've seen how they use. I can't tell.
Yeah. Okay, that is good. I hope they use them.
I hope so. But I mean, there are a requirement. I mean, London Plan has got very specific areas. You must have 5 square meters for 1 bedroom flat, and then 7 for 2 bedroom flat, etc. So I don't really think we can avoid it. And I think when we've known through the pandemic how important to have it is to have a bit of space outside, and I think they will come in handy.
Yeah, no, it's good. Okay, thanks.
Ziba, do you know how long people tend to stay in the build for rent properties?
Well, Barry, I can only, I mean, with rehearsal rooms, we went after 2 years to see how it was doing, because and it was part of sort of open house, and we'd volunteered to show people around, and we were hanging around in the common area, in the common room that I showed you. And some people turned up, and some of the residents, just in the course of as to say what they were doing. And they are, it's just to do what they normally do, meaning they make a coffee or do whatever they do. And a couple of them, when they realized who we were, they started saying how wonderful it was, how much they liked living there, and then they wanted to stay, and so on. But that was in 2018, I think. So I really don't know how long they would continue to stay. They were simply saying that it felt like home, and it was so convenient, and they liked the roof terraces, and they liked the common room. But it's difficult to tell. I really don't know. It depends on, and we were talking to the people who are managing it as well, and they were saying that because there's so much now on the market, it's very, if their hardest task was getting somebody to come there, because when they came there and compared it with the what else was available, they really could see the difference. But when you're looking at it online, and which everybody is, in fact, one of the people who came to see us was an American who had kind of seen it online from wherever they were in America, and then just rented it and moved in, and they was just so delighted. And this young man had his father visiting him, and they were saying how beautiful it was, and they were so lucky to have spotted it online. But online, you can't tell. People show the best aspect of their schemes. It's not until you're there. So the short answer is I don't know. What do you think, Jordan? Do you have any idea how long people stay?
I'm not sure, but I mean, we had reports that exactly that people had visited nearby developments and chosen that one over the others, which is, it, like Ziba says, you have to experience places often to feel the difference. It's quite hard in pictures sometimes to see it.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that we are old-fashioned enough to still believe that the plan is the generator. It doesn't mean it's the only thing, but we really hell of a lot of effort into planning our schemes. And this what now passes as a London vernacular is everywhere, and you think, oh, what's the difference? I guess we can't escape the spirit of time, and we're all using a certain palette of materials and certain ways of treating our facades and so on. But actually, the difference between something that is an integral.
We've lost you a bit there. We've lost Zeba right at the last minute. She's run out. I'm not sure if she's going to come back now. That's a shame. That was, well, I thought that was really fascinating. To live in one of those places. So I don't know, we've lost Zeba completely, but the recording will be available. Thank you all for coming. And,
well, Jordan's still here. You can ask a question.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm happy.
Yes, and I'll maybe email Zeba.
If there are more questions, sure. And Guy's here as
there are
well.
more questions. There we go.
I was just gonna comment really that what I like so much about your work is the simplicity of the planning and the fact that it's so repetitive and simple, and that kind of allows you to spend money on things which give delight. You know, the kind of balconies on the rehearsal rooms and those sorts of things. I think, you know, so often today you see schemes which are, you know, overly complicated, and you think, you know, there must have been a huge amount of effort and cost gone into creating it. And it's just so refreshing to see things which are done simply and well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a recurring theme, you know, and some of those sort of research and development projects are kind of overtly about the idea of repetition and that sort of thing, but it kind of comes through, I hope, in all of our projects, because we as a starting point try and sort of design repeated components, and then the differences come out where sort of sites and briefs ask for it rather than just for its own sake. And you know, that's what allows you to sort of design a few things well rather than hundreds of things not as well. And yeah, that's kind of, it's definitely one of the main themes. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah.
Any more questions? I have emailed Zeba. I think
Cool.
talking non-stop for 50 minutes is quite a feat. But thank you, Jordan.
Sure. No,
thank you, everyone, for attending. And yeah, if you have any other questions, then email me and I'll put them to Zeba. Otherwise, there will be a recording if you'd like to be sent that. I will put it on our YouTube channel as well. Oh, we have Master here. Hello. Hello, Philip.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I'm late. I got caught up with huge amounts of emails from the company, and then suddenly realised when I replied to all these urgent emails, I'd actually missed this evening, which I wanted to come to. So
a whole day had gone.
More than that, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's difficult. Well, the recording will be available, I was just saying, and yeah, it's been a great evening. A shame it couldn't have been in practice, Jordan, but
yeah,
I understand
no,
you have some COVID sufferers, so you know it's what we're all used to now, isn't it?
Start, but we're getting back soon, I hope.
Yeah, we're starting to get out there a bit more, but this was a lovely substitute, so thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Well,
there we go. Thank you, everyone. It's now just gone 7, so you can all have your dinner now, and we'll catch up soon. So good evening.
Bye.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.